Welcome, welcome. My name is Davis Baum. Tonight in my garage, we're reading Howl, and we're going to be talking about. What are we going to be talking about? I suppose today we're going to be talking about fulfillment, or the lack of fulfillment in this crazy world. Howl was written by Allen Ginsberg in 1955. This is shortly after World War II. This is in the midst of the Korean War, and a little bit of the Vietnam War. And around this time, there's major things going on. We saw the atomic bomb happen. We saw the Holocaust happen. And a couple years later, Americans turned to the white picket fence suburbs and started making a life like nothing ever happened. But not all Americans did that. Many Americans found themselves experiencing this insane amount of cognitive dissonance due to their goals, their desires, their authenticity being confronted and challenged by society. This is a really common theme in the 20th century. You saw this by those Ernest Hemingway types, the Lost Generation. Then you saw it with the hippies, and then you saw it with the punks, and now we see it a lot today with the TikToks. Allen Ginsberg was a gay man who wanted to be a poet, but had convinced himself at some point that he should have a girlfriend and do market research. He did that for a while, but he realized that it wasn't what he was looking for. And in reality, he knew what he was looking for was be a gay man who did poetry. So he did it, and he did one of the best jobs of the 20th century by far. Howl today is still regarded as one of the best poetic works in the last 100 years, and I cannot agree more with that sentiment. But to go back to what I was saying though, Howl is a lament for all those creative types, all those atypical people who did not find a place for them in society, did not find the white picket house in the suburb, did not find the girl, and so on, but rather they found fire and weed and sex and cock and endless balls. Great idea. Howl was banned for its use of sexual language, and if you think about it, it was the 50s. It was like the parents of the generation before, like the boomers in full-fledged boomerness. And sex was a very taboo thing then. And a lot of the words that Ginsberg uses trigger people from that time period. They couldn't handle a word like cock. Cock is used dozens of times almost. But this generation of artists, specifically the artists, not everyone else who are doing the right thing in life or the normal path in life, but all the artists, creative types were known as the Beat Generation. And partly because of the music, but also because of the idea that they were being beaten down by the wooden rod of the man. The opening line to Howl in the first part, there's 3 parts and a footnote. The opening part kind of says it better than any other thing I could say. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked. Right there. And there's a couple other lines too that kind of flesh it out, but right there you kind of see that what Ginsberg is saying is people are being beaten down because they cannot navigate the world in the way that you are supposed to. I don't want to go into this line by line because if I do, this video will take way too long. But another line in the first part that really fledges out why he thinks that people are being treated poorly is this one. And this is in reaction to the institutionalizations and the arrests and the criminalizations of people and the bad portraits being painted of people who were these creative types, and right here I think, and who were given instead the concrete void of insulin, metrazole, electricity, hydrotherapy, psychotherapy, occupational therapy, ping pong, and amnesia. Now, I think what that line is trying to say is that these people, these creative types, these atypical people in society are being beaten down and treated and drugged and shocked by society to become something that fits into the machine, that becomes a pretty cog that will do its part and keep this process going. And I don't think anyone's saying that we should change people doing good things for their community or doing good things for society, but having a society that punishes and makes people outcasts for not fitting into its overarching themes can be negative for some people. I think that's just obvious. But what is it? What is it about society for Ginsberg and other beat poet and beat writers, beat musicians, the beats? I hate beats. What is it that they are against? What is it that they see as trampling them? Ginsberg says it's Moloch. Moloch was a biblical demon being who devoured human flesh and souls and grew off the agony and suffering of people. Ginsberg uses that line or that figure in a poetic way, where it actually stems from a peyote trip with his girlfriend when he was trying to be normal, and he saw the Sir Francis Drake Hotel in New York turn into Moloch, this demonic being. Look at the Charlie Chaplin Moloch bit. You can look at that. I think it was probably something similar to that. What is Moloch? Who is this thing that is trampling and beating and devouring the souls of people? So another big part for Ginsberg is his spirituality. He was born Jewish, but I think at some point he kind of turned to mysticism, and you can see a lot of Buddhism as well in his piece, in this piece and in most of his pieces. But I think a very important part of how he understands Moloch is everything that is an institution, or all these institutions that promote these sense-based conclusions of fulfillment. I think this line does a great job at accurately saying it, if you can accurately say it. Moloch, whose love is endless oil and stone. Moloch, whose soul is electricity and banks. Moloch, whose poverty is the specter of genius. Moloch, whose fate is a cloud of sexless hydrogen. Moloch, whose name is the mind. Moloch are these institutions that suck out human life for the purpose of empirical achievement. By building up these granite houses and oil and this and all these resources and these technological advancements, and saying that the more this happens, the better, rather than looking for fulfillment in a more internal spiritual place, some selfless place that is closer to those spiritual views that Ginsberg shares. I think this is a great line that says, here's what Moloch has taken. Visions, omens, hallucinations, miracles, ecstasies, gone down the American River, dreams, adorations, illuminations, religions, the whole boatload of sensitive bullshit. Now, that's a very intense line, but most of this poem is very intense, and if you get a chance to read it, you'll see that if you kind of get into it, you get into like a meditative beat where you're just reading and taking it in, and it's very intense. But that line, as intense as it is, I think what it's saying is all these spiritual values, these miracles, these ecstasies, these enlightenment-like behaviors have just sailed down the American River for the purpose of capitalism and oil and resources and technology for the sake of those things, as if just getting that will be fulfillment. More than anything, I've been saying the whole time, Ginsberg does not hate these things as much as he hates that society makes this the end-all be-all. That anything outside of this is what's crazy, when in reality, that being the standard and that standard being pushed upon people is what makes people crazy. The third part of Howl it's like an empathetic statement, where Ginsberg wants to connect with his audience, the other beats, and it's all centered around Carl Solomon, who the poem is dedicated to in a way. The subtitle is Howl for Carl Solomon. Now, who's Carl Solomon? Carl Solomon is someone that he met in a psychiatric ward Ginsberg met when he was doing his stay there. And he was someone who experienced electrotherapy and was a writer, and he was a Dadaist and a crazy guy, but really interesting. And Ginsberg saw him, look at me calling him crazy. Ginsberg saw him as a representative person of the Beat movement, or of the Beat generation as a whole. This poem is, howling for Carl Solomon, but it's also howling for all the Carl Solomons, all the people that share in his madness that the world has bestowed upon him. I love this line where he goes, "I'm with you in Rockland, where we hug and kiss the United States under our bedsheets, the United States that coughs all night and won't let us sleep." Just paints a picture that this is a statement of empathy, that between you and me, I know exactly what you're going through, and you're not crazy. What's crazy is this whole world that has built up before any of us had been here, and all of a sudden we're part of it, and we have to navigate it, and we have to find fulfillment and meaning and purpose. And if we do what it says, we're more than likely not to find it. So what is this whole thing we found ourselves into? How do we navigate it? We can't be that crazy. Not everyone can be. The footnote to Howl is kind of the answer to the issue, and it is a recognition that everything is bigger than the self, that the subjective experience is limited, and that everything in an inherent way, this very Buddhist, mystical way of looking at things, has a holiness to it, or is holy, is divine. One of my favorite lines that I think just sums it up the whole thing is when he goes, "Holy the angel in Moloch." And he says this after like 10 lines, just, "Holy the angel in Moloch." And that is a very, very powerful realization for many mystics when they realize that the subjective antagonist is still part of the objective good. The subjective antagonist is still divine, it's still holy. But by recognizing that, it's not that that should be cut away, but by realizing that anything should be cut away, that actually a free and open discussion on these values, on these ideas, on these topics, on these selves, on the authenticity, that is what is right. And part of that is recognizing the divinity in that which is trying to rip divinity away. And it's a very interesting dilemma for many mystics, me included, but over time you begin to start to piece it together, and it's pretty good. So in conclusion, Howl is a howl against Moloch, but also for Carl Solomon. This whole thing, this whole experience is crazy. No matter who you are, if you're fulfilled, if you're unfulfilled, if you're doing everything right, or if you're failed everything, it's crazy. And no one who really considers that for a second can disagree with it, because the fact that you're here, the fact that you're thinking, the fact that you're moving really is an anomaly. It doesn't make any sense when you actually consider it. And if you consider it too long, you might just lose your mind. But part of that crazy experience is finding fulfillment outside of the self conquering the world. The most famous line, I think, for that would be Descartes. He said, "Conquer yourself, not the world." And I think that's a great way to look at fulfillment, is by finding it in the self, by conquering your own issues, your own desires, your own dilemmas. That will bring you more fulfillment than by having everything in the world and filling it up with sense-based pleasure. But the argument that society hands you at a young age, that if you do this, if you go to school, if you get a stable job, if you find a great girl and you have a kid and you get a house and maybe sometime you invest in a company, if you do all those things, you'll be happy, you'll find fulfillment, and everything will make sense. You'll have your purpose. That's a pipe dream. For some people it works, for some people it doesn't. To say that for all the vast identities that exist forever, this is the answer is a little silly. And I think that's what Ginsberg wanted as well. He just wanted a society that recognizes the self can be many things. And by accepting the self, by accepting authenticity, rather than the best fitting cog for the machine, I think that is what he was going for. Something that is more open-minded, something that is more free in discussion and free in belief, nothing that's restricted in another way, but just open in general. And I think that's the answer to Howl. But Howl is all about the lament, it's the ode, it's the madhouse that we live in. And if you want to get into a great state of mind, I'd recommend it, nothing more. I hope that was good. I'm gonna try and edit this tomorrow morning. I felt good about that one. That was my third video. Wearing a sweater, feeling pretty good. Thank you for watching. Leave some comments, please. But have a good one. Thank you.